Yesterday, I passed by the beach here in the Netherlands. There is this beach at The Hague called Scheveningen. Me and a fellow believer, we went there. You know who he is, that's Kevin. He also was in a live stream with me, I believe a week or two ago. Now, when we arrived there, it was a bit crowded. And we just walked around on the pier. And there was this portion of the pier that we thought, hey, let's check that out. It was this kind of a dome-shaped building. Not exactly a dome, but it was kind of like a dome. So we just walked towards it. But when we arrived, we heard the receptionist talking to other guests saying that it's a hotel. So we just walked back. Now, what did we lose? We didn't lose anything. We thought, hey, there's a dome-shaped building. We've never been there, so let's check it out. Because there's a view upon the sea from there, and it might be interesting. But we couldn't enter in because it was a hotel only for paid guests. We walked away and we had other views at sea, and the day went on. What we did by walking to that hotel that we weren't aware what an hotel was, we took a risk. If we were able to enter in, it would have been an addition. If we wouldn't be able to enter in, we haven't lost anything, because we already had a view on sea all the time, because we were at the beach, remember? Now, that's the difference between a risk and gambling. I just explained the risk to you. Now, what is a gamble? A gamble would be if you play Russian roulette. Russian roulette is, for those that don't know, you pick up a gun. Instead of putting 6 bullets in it, you only put 1 bullet. And then it's a revolver. So let me correct this, it's a revolver. And then you revolve the case where the bullet should be, but it's only 1 bullet. And then you fire it to your head. If the bullet is at the exit and you fire it, you're dead. If not, you survive. Now, I don't know who invented this game. Because it's not even a game you should play. Because in this case, you have 1 in 2 chances of dying. Because either when you fire, the bullet hits through your head and you die, or it doesn't. But you say it's just 1 of the 6 holes that have a bullet. Well, it doesn't matter if it was 3 of the 6 cases. Either when you fire, a bullet goes through or not. So in this case, if the bullet goes through, you're dead. There's no tomorrow anymore. There's no compensations. No, oh, at least I've learned from this experience. No. In a gamble, you put yourself at risk of either dying or you put yourself in a position where whatever you lose cannot be compensated for nor replaced. Now, maybe I need to rephrase this, because in a gamble, there's no such thing as a risk. I said you put yourself at risk of dying. What I mean is, you're likely to die when you gamble. When you gamble, it doesn't have to be Russian roulette. It can also be that you go to a casino and put your month's wage into a machine and you don't win anything, or even if you win maybe 20 euros. If you put in 2,000 euros, your salary, and you play 200 times, and one time you win 20 euros, you've lost 2,000 euros and you got back 20 euros. That's a loss. Where do you get the other 1,980 euros from? You can't. So whether it's Russian roulette or going to a casino, that's gambling. And gambling, it's something you rationally wouldn't do. Yet on an emotional level, a lot of people are addicted to gambling. Now, let's look beyond Russian roulette and let's look beyond the casino. Because gambling also takes place outside of the casino and outside of Russian roulette. In the streets, you have people playing poker, which is also a type of gambling, but outside of a casino. But the number one gambling we participate in without realize it's a gamble is conforming to society. Oh yes, I said it. When you conform to society, you gamble with your life. You may say, but Rashid, how can conforming to society be gambling? Now, conformity in a community is different because a community are the human beings living somewhere. If everyone is driving on the left side of the road, you're not going to drive on the right side. If people are standing in line in the supermarket, you're not going to push through or run to the supermarket and cause accidents or cause trouble or danger. No. So conformity in a community is different than conforming to society. Society is a fear construct, and we know that fear is destructive. We know that the Heavenly Father has not given us a spirit of fear. So anytime you conform to fear, you are losing. There is no winning when you conform to fear. So, society is a fear construct that adults enact, namely worldly adults. That means when you conform to society, you lose. You lose. What you get in return is just a symbolic pat on the back and some wage at the end of the month, just to keep you from dying physically. That's it. There is no long-term gain nor growth when conforming to society. There is not. And here's the thing, by conforming to society, you'll be operating in a spirit of fear. When you operate in fear, you can't think clearly anymore. When you operate in fear, you develop brain damage. When you operate in fear, you develop physical diseases, physical infirmities. When you walk in fear, you cannot discern other people that well. When you walk in fear, you end up in toxic situations with other toxic people, and you end up becoming toxic over time also. When you walk in fear, before you know it, you can be victimized and you didn't see it coming. And if that act of victimization was fatal, you've died. You don't even know where you were victimized. You died. So conforming to society is one big gamble. But it's the number one gamble most people think that they can handle. You shouldn't be gambling anyway. You shouldn't put yourself in danger where if you lose, and the loss is quite likely to happen, you either don't survive it or you can't replace the loss with anything else, or you can't compensate it with anything better. When you take a risk, you operate from safety and you operate with the mindset of gaining for the long term. That's taking a risk. Gamble simply means, you know what? I don't really value my life that much, but hey, I don't feel like I have anything to lose because I don't have much self-worth anyway. And you know, one day I'm going to die anyway, so you might as well give over and have a fun time while it lasts. That's gambling. That's the mindset of gambling. And I'm telling you, many people out there have this mindset of gambling. And governments in the world take advantage of this. Corporations also. Cults also take advantage of this. We as believers were not allowed to gamble because gambling is a fearful mindset. It's a mindset of despair. We shouldn't have such ways of thinking. Look, the reason why people think they can get away, gambling their life away by conforming to society is because they have been tricked by success stories. You see this successful businesswoman. She has her own corporation and she is a millionaire and she is feministic and she becomes the promotion to young girls in high school, become a feminist, get a career, forget about being feminine and all of that, and she'll win. And because there are a few more such examples, a lot of teenage girls think, hey, becoming a feminist may bring advantages. And hey, when you're a feminist, hey, you can act like a man too, sleeping around. And because today you're sleeping around, it's not shamed, but it's framed as women's empowerment. Hey, let's do it. And then women end up following this example. And they end up sexually defective, they end up with STDs, they end up being semen toilets that all guys in college are run through. You know what I mean with that? So then they end up approaching 30 without a husband, without a long-term boyfriend, without children, with emotional baggage, also physical baggage, and now they end up messed up and realize that the only thing they have is a full-time job that exhausts them. Now they want to settle down and find a good man after being ran through by tons of dudes who didn't even care about them. And then they realized that this famous feminist woman was actually an actress, because they realized that it was all something against their own femininity. Now, in this case, they've wasted their 20s, sometimes their early 30s, chasing a hoax. Can they go back in time? Can they go back on the timeline into the past and change their mind? No, they can't. They can only change their mind today. What happened, happened. They can't change that. But here's the thing, they can't change the consequences either. All those guys that ran through them sexually, they ran through them. And a lot of those guys are now married, they are with feminine women, and those stories about them being the semen toilet of the sorority or the semen toilet of the community, it's there. They can't undo that. The way it affects their brain and their body, they can't undo that. So even if they find a good man right now, they can restore and recover, but it will take a while. And there's still going to be consequences they have to deal with. They cannot take back the years they spent partying and escalating. So it's a big gamble. But at the time when the gamble was offered to them, because they were tricked by success stories, they thought, hey, it may go wrong, but it likely will not go wrong with us. Or let's look at another example. Let's say, well, this is an obvious one, selling drugs in the streets as a way to get an extra income. Now, the chances of being arrested and put in prison for a few years is there. But the bigger danger is that jealous fellow drug dealers may kill you and take your drugs. Now, a lot of guys who end up selling drugs in the streets, they earn good money in the beginning. So they think, hey, I've been doing this for a year or two, nothing happens to me, I'm experienced. Then one day, suddenly they're stabbed. Not by a fellow drug dealer, but by some low-life scum who's jealous about their gains. Or maybe one day they're about to deliver some drugs and they're set up. It's actually a setup, it's undercover cop, and they end up in prison. Now they have a criminal record. So either they die or they end up wasting years of their life in prison. Fertile years of their life. Now, when it was offered to them, you can sell drugs in the streets just for a little while, they thought, hey, it's just for once or twice, but when it worked out, they got the money, they thought, hey, I'm safe. Well, they're not. Or you're told, go to church every Sunday, and at some point you'll be blessed. Now, it's nowhere written in scripture that you need to attend church to be blessed. But hey, your parents did it, your grandparents did it, so you think, hey, I can do it too. And because you consider your parents and grandparents blessed people, you think I can do that. What you don't see is that your parents and grandparents remain stuck their whole life. But because they had full-time jobs and they had what the world calls stability, you thought, hey, that's a blessing. But that stability is just bondage. But so you go and you realize somewhere that something's off, but you think, you know what? I can handle it. I can do this. No, you can't. You end up hypnotized. You end up going to church every Sunday for decades, just like your parents or grandparents did, and you don't accomplish anything on the long term. Look, anytime you gamble, you lose. There is no winning when you gamble. Let's say you go to a casino and you gamble and you win $500,000 and you leave with $500,000. The God forces you to re-gamble it. So you leave with $500,000. Some men use charms to win at casinos. Don't go to casinos and don't use charms. Both are defective and both are wrong. But let's say you use a charm and you win €500,000. Well, let's say you go to horse races and you bet several times and you leave with a lot of money. All those other gamblers lost. So they're going to remember that you've won. So they're going to develop jealousy and envy towards you. And even if that doesn't happen, they will talk saying, hey, I lost all my money in the casino today or at the horse races. But this guy over here, man, he went away with all the money. Now, the purpose of casinos and horse races are all about keeping the money to the organization, whether it's the casino or the racetrack for horses. So if you win the money, there are others losing. And others that lose are going to blame you. So either you'll face psychic violence or you may face physical criminal violence, people chasing after you. And if others realize, hey, this guy has a lot of money now, other people who never had the opportunity to get all that money, they may not be involved in gambling, they will take the gamble to rob you or to take your life just so that you can't enjoy it. They're not interested in the money, but they're upset that you have an advantage and they not. So they want to take advantage away from you. And some people will gamble, losing their life or going to prison just to prevent you from enjoying some benefits. Yes, you have such crazy people out there. So there is no winning in gambling. Anytime you gamble, you lose. It's guaranteed. Either the loss unfolds immediately or the loss is delayed, or it comes in stages. The reason why so many people gamble is because of pride. They think they are an exemption. And I'm telling you, when it comes to darkness, there are no exemptions. Anytime you participate in darkness, there are losses. Now, I already explained to you, gambling is just in a casino or the Russian roulette or at a horse track, betting. Gambling is anytime you put yourself in a situation or in a mindset where you're guaranteed to lose, but you think that you can handle it and cheat yourself into winning. Anytime you put yourself in a losing situation or in a defective mindset, you're guaranteed to lose. But some people think they are the exception, they can cheat themselves into winning. You can only win in a winning situation. You can only win by having a winning attitude. You can only win by being wise and flexible. Anytime you put yourself in an inflexible, static situation, you lose. Just because you see other people escaping harsh consequences doesn't mean that they have won. If you are at a party where a lot of violent criminals are present and all the violent criminals have beef with one another, so they're in fights with one another, you being at that party where a lot of criminals with guns were angry with one another, it's guaranteed to go down. Let's say the criminals begin to shoot one another, begin to stab one another, and you run out of the club. You almost died as collateral damage. The fact that you managed to escape is not a success. It's not something to brag about. You should have never been in that situation to begin with. The stock market is also a form of gambling, but this institutionalized gambling. They institutionalized this gambling phenomenon called the stock market, and that's why a lot of people think, hey, if you have stocks and you get revenue, that's good. But here's the thing. If you're not on time by selling your stocks, or if you want to sell your stocks when nobody wants it, you lose everything. Look, a risk is when you operate from safety to achieve for the long term. That's risking. So even if you don't achieve or get what you're aiming for, you can still you still learn from the experience. And by learning from experience, now you can use the experience to teach other people, or you can use your journey as an experience to do something else. So in a risk, it's no guarantee of losing. In a risk, you don't lose. You can only gain. But when you gamble, you lose automatically by even being in that mindset or in that situation. Most people gamble thinking they can conform to society and society's expectations, and it will end up well with them. And I'm telling you, it will not. It will not. Remember the example I gave to you. If you're at a party where there are a lot of rival gang members or there are a lot of criminals angry with one another and those criminals have weapons, at some point during the party, those criminals with all that anger going to encounter one another, they're going to be triggered. It's going to be a fist fight or a knife fight or a gun fight. And you're there at the party. The fact that you know that there are a lot of rival gang members there should already trigger you to say, I'm not going to the party. If you arrive at the party, if you notice a lot of angry people look at one another, you should leave. But what if you stay there? If you stay and you end up dying, well, that was a given. Or if you end up wounded and you have to go to the hospital, now you may be paralyzed, or at least you have a scratch that becomes a scar. Or if you escape, the other gang members that escape will remember you being there. So if they want more information about the night, they may come to you. Or if the police wants to interrogate someone, you are a witness, so the police will bother you too. And the police may even charge you if you don't cooperate with the investigation. So even if you manage to escape, that trauma of what happened, you have to process it. And at some point, it will come out that you were there. Let's say 20 years later, or 30 years later, your children find out you were at this party where a lot of people died. Your children will ask, but Dad, I thought you were never a man who used to go to such places. Or let's say your wife never knew about this. Now you have something to explain. The thing is, in a situation I just described of that party with a lot of criminals in it, the loss is there, guaranteed. Even when you manage to escape, the escape will haunt you. So, we need to unlearn gambling. Gambling is how society operates. Gambling is the way of the world. We as believers, we should not gamble because we operate in the security provided to us by the Heavenly Father. Yes, we take risks, but we don't gamble. Know the difference between a risk and gambling. With a risk, there's always some way you can win. Look, if you end up enrolling in college, but you don't finish your degree, but you learn skills during your time, and you also learned 2 more languages. Let's say you were going to college and in your free time, you learned French and Spanish. Now you may not have graduated, but you still learn Spanish and French in your spare time besides studying. So now you can use French and Spanish to get a job as an interpreter, or you can start your own business and reach out to the French-speaking nations in Africa or to Latin America where they speak Spanish. So even though you didn't get the degree, besides the degree, you gained knowledge while studying, and you also risked learning other languages beside it. So now those were risks. The degree did not work out, but the 2 languages you want to learn, that did work out, and now you can advance in those 2. Now that's a risk. A gamble would be, you know what? Let's just surrender to this 9 to 5. That will be how my life will be, and just make the best of it. That's a gamble. Most people, they gamble. I'm not just talking about the 9 to 5. They gamble when it comes to attitudes. Their parents raised them a certain way. Instead of them facing how their parents raised them and reflecting whether it's the right way or not, they just get along with how they were raised. Because, hey, they're used to it. And then, when things go wrong in their lives, they will blame everyone else. But then others will point out to them, hold on a minute. You are quite impatient with other people. Or you're quite narcissistic. And then will say, hey, I was raised to never open my mouth unless people ask me to. I was raised to always mind my own business. I was raised this and that. Then people tell you, hey, but you're an adult now. You're a grown man, you're a grown woman. Just because your parents raised you a certain way doesn't mean you have to continue the ways of your parents. How did the ways of your parents work out for them? And by the way, your parents, you're a grown man, a grown woman, your parents aren't going to live forever. So you can't always say, well, this is how I was raised. You have to face yourself and improve when necessary. But don't you know that a lot of people will simply hold on to how they were raised? Even when it becomes obvious that the way they were raised in the present doesn't work for them? But no, instead of facing that they were raised in a defective way, or instead of facing that the way they were raised is outdated, now they will make excuses to remain defective. Look, if your parents grew up in an era of depression and civil war, if they grew up in that era, and if you also grew up in an era when there was still a lot of societal conflict, then your parents raised a certain way to survive that environment. But let's say now you're out of that environment, or let's say now that the political situation of the country has changed. Now you can't operate in that survival attitude anymore. Now you need to adapt. Or let's say now you grew up in an industrialized society. Society is not good anyway. But let's say you're part of a community within that society and it's industrialized. Just because everyone gets along with the expectations doesn't mean you should too. If the expectations of the community you live in doesn't add up, you should negotiate with them or excuse yourself away from that community. Some people say, hey, but this is how society is today, or this is how people do it today. Okay, look, if people drive cars today and you want to ride around on a horse, that's not going to work out well. You can ride on a horse at horse races or in villages, in rural villages. But when it comes to daily traffic, you either take the public transport or you take the car. Or you go on a bicycle, but you're not going to operate as if it's the 18th century. If everyone's using laptops today, but you want to use a typewriter, something used in the 1920s, it's not going to work well. So of course you need to adapt to how things are today, but you adapt to how things are today on practical stuff, on logistical, practical things. You're not going to just adapt to whatever the environment expects from you unconditionally. Look, in the past they used to use Dutch guilders in the Netherlands. Since 2002 they used the euro. You can't pay with Dutch guilders anywhere in the world anymore. So for you to go to Dutch guilders to a shop to purchase something, they will decline you, rightfully so. Because now you have to use euros. So you adapting to the practical things of the time, that's good. But it doesn't mean that every expectation of people around you just have to absorb. Look, anytime you submit to violence, you lose. You can tolerate violence if you know how to shut it down, or if the perpetrator has the leverage over you in a situation. Let's say you're in a shop and suddenly someone puts a gun to your head, tells you to hand over the money. You hand over the money. You cooperate, not because of submission, but because of necessity. Now you can, in that case, you tolerate the violence because fighting the violence may end up in you dying. That fighting the violence will actually be a gamble. So you can tolerate the violence out of necessity till you're safe, but that doesn't mean that you excuse the violence. Anytime you submit to violence, it means that you approve of it, you get along with it. You cannot submit to violence and end up well. It never works. To submit to violence simply means that you agree with the traumas and you agree with the consequences. That means that you stand behind the harm that is being done. Yet a lot of people out there that think they can submit to violence or give in to the spirit of fear and end up well. That's gambling. Give it up. Well, I've spoken a lot about gambling this video. I hope it's clear now. Unlearn gambling. I agree with Christ, and be at peace.